The royal decree arrived at dawn, sealed in black wax, the color of death sentences and broken pack law. Marcus Aurelius Corvinus, Supreme Alpha of the Northern Territories, collapsed during the blood oath ceremony, his body convulsing as silver poison coursed through his veins. The High Council moved immediately to conceal it. They wrapped him in silks, locked the throne room, and declared a 7-day mourning period for an illness that didn't exist. But I knew the truth. I'd seen the tremor in his hand 3 months prior, watched his golden eyes fade to amber, heard the weakness in his voice when he signed my banishment papers. They weren't hiding an illness. They were orchestrating a coup. And if you're feeling this tension right now, if your heart is already racing, tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. You're going to need it for what comes next. My name is Livia Kasha Marin, and I am the Omega they erased from history. The forbidden bloodline they burned from every record, every tapestry, every whispered legend. I was born under a blood moon to a mother who died screaming my name, and a father who was executed for treason before I drew my first breath. The pack law was clear. Omegas of fallen houses had no claim, no voice, no future. We were ghosts in our own land, invisible unless someone needed a scapegoat or a sacrifice. For 18 years, I survived in the shadows of the Corvinus estate. I scrubbed floors in the western wing where Marcus's chambers overlooked the eternal forest. I memorized the pattern of his footsteps, the cadence of his breathing, the way he'd pause at the window each midnight as if searching for something he'd lost. I knew him better than his own council, better than his beta commanders, better than the simpering nobles who circled him like vultures. And I loved him. God's help me, I loved the alpha who'd signed my parents' death warrants. But 3 months ago, during the Harvest Moon Festival, I made a mistake. I looked at him directly. Our eyes met across the grand hall. His gold to my silver, and something ancient stirred between us. The mating bond. Forbidden, impossible, catastrophic. An alpha of pure bloodline and an omega of a condemned house. The pack law would demand both our deaths. He felt it too. I saw the recognition flash across his face, the horror, the desperate longing. Then his chancellor, Drusus Castor Ven, whispered something in his ear, and Marcus's expression hardened to stone. The next morning I was banished to the Shadowlands on charges of witchcraft, sedition, and attempting to manipulate pack hierarchy through forbidden magic. No trial. No defense. Just exile. I should have died in the Shadowlands. The territory beyond the northern gates where the pack law held no sway, where rogues and exiles fought over scraps of territory like wild dogs. But I didn't die. I learned to fight. I learned to listen. And I learned the truth about what was happening inside those gleaming palace walls. The poison wasn't random. It was deliberate, carefully administered over months by someone with access to the Alpha's private chambers. His food, his wine, his very blood. Someone who understood exactly how much silver could weaken without killing. How to create symptoms that mimicked natural decline. How to make an Alpha appear unfit to rule. Drusus Castor Ven. The chancellor with ambitions that burned hotter than his loyalty. The beta who'd spent 20 years positioning himself as indispensable, who'd arranged marriages and alliances, who controlled the High Council like puppets on golden strings. He wanted the throne. And Marcus's illness was his ladder to it. I returned to the capital on the 7th day, the day the mourning period ended and the High Council would convene to declare Marcus's fate. I moved through the city like smoke, wearing stolen robes and a hood pulled low. The streets buzzed with rumors. The Alpha was dying. The Alpha was already dead. The Alpha had lost his mind and was locked in the dungeons. The Council would name a new Supreme Alpha by sunset. No one mentioned that pack law required a direct heir or a trial by combat. No one questioned why Drusus had suddenly emerged as the primary candidate despite having no royal blood, no ancestral claim, no legitimate path to power. They'd rewritten the rules while Marcus lay dying, and no one dared challenge them. The palace was a fortress. Guards at every entrance, council members huddled in private chambers, servants whispering in corners. I couldn't enter through conventional means, so I used the tunnels. The old smuggling routes built centuries ago when the Corvinus line first claimed these territories. My mother had shown them to me before she died, made me memorize every twist and turn, every hidden doorway. She'd known. Somehow she'd known I'd need them. I emerged in the throne room through a panel behind the dais, stepping into shadows while the High Council assembled. 12 betas in ceremonial robes, each representing a major house. Drusus stood at their center, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, his expression carefully composed in false grief. "We gather under solemn circumstances," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Our beloved Supreme Alpha, Marcus Aurelius Corvinus, has succumbed to an illness that ravaged his body and mind. For the good of the pack, for the stability of our territories, we must act decisively. Pack law demands strength. Pack law demands clarity. Pack law demands a leader capable of guiding us through these uncertain times. Pack law demands an heir," I said, stepping from the shadows. The chamber exploded in chaos. Guards drew weapons. Council members leaped from their seats. Drusus's carefully composed mask cracked, revealing the fury beneath. "Seize her," he commanded. "The exiled Omega has returned. She violates her banishment. She defiles this sacred space with her presence." "I violate nothing," I said, moving toward the dais with measured steps. "I invoke the right of challenge under ancestral pack law. The law that predates your convenient council, your manufactured decrees, your poisoned throne." Silence crashed down like a hammer. The right of challenge was ancient, brutal, undeniable. Any pack member with evidence of corruption could invoke it, could demand a trial before the assembled pack, could force truth into light no matter how powerful the accused. Drusus's face paled. "You have no standing. You are banished. You are nothing. I am Livia Cassia Marin, daughter of the Marin line, and I carry evidence that will shatter every lie you've built." I pulled a vial from my robes, glass filled with silver-tinted liquid. "This is the poison you've been feeding Marcus for months. I recovered it from your private chambers 3 nights ago. I had it analyzed by a rogue healer in the Shadowlands. Silver nightshade, processed with mountain ash and grave soil. A compound that weakens without killing, that creates symptoms identical to mind deterioration." "Lies!" Drusus roared. "She fabricates evidence. She invents conspiracies. She—" "Then submit to a truth binding," I interrupted. "Ancient magic that cannot be deceived. Let the pack witness both our claims under the old oaths. If I lie, I burn. If you lie, you burn. Simple. Clean. Just." The council erupted in argument. Some demanded I be executed immediately. Others insisted the right of challenge be honored. The legal debate raged while I stood perfectly still, holding that vial like a weapon. Then a voice cut through the chaos, weak but unmistakable. "Grant her request." Marcus emerged from a side chamber, supported by 2 guards. He looked like death, gaunt, trembling, his skin pale as winter frost. But his eyes still burned gold, and his voice still carried the weight of absolute authority. "Marcus!" Drusus rushed forward, playing the concerned advisor. "You shouldn't be on your feet." The healers said. The healers said many things. Marcus's gaze found mine across the chamber, and I felt the mating bond pulse between us, stronger now, undeniable. But perhaps it's time for truth instead of convenient diagnoses. He made his way to the throne with agonizing slowness, refusing assistance. When he sat, the entire chamber felt the shift in power, the reminder that despite his physical weakness, he was still the supreme alpha, still the ultimate authority. "Livia Cassia Marin," he said formally. "You invoke the right of challenge. State your accusation." I didn't hesitate. "Chancellor Drusus Castor Ven has systematically poisoned you over the past 4 months with the intent of weakening your authority, manipulating the High Council, and positioning himself to claim the throne through manufactured legal precedent. He orchestrated my banishment to remove the one person who might recognize the symptoms. He rewrote pack law to allow a non-heir succession. And he planned to declare you mentally unfit tomorrow, assuming permanent regency before executing you quietly within the month. The chamber went silent as a tomb. Every eye turned to Drusus, whose expression had frozen in calculated neutrality. "These are extraordinary accusations," Marcus said quietly. "Do you have proof beyond the vial?" "I have 6 witnesses from your household staff who were threatened into silence after noticing irregularities in your meals. I have purchase records from an underground market in the Shadowlands showing Drusus's seal on orders for silver nightshade. I have testimony from a council member who was approached about supporting a regency claim. And I have this." I pulled a folded document from my robes. A draft decree, written in Drusus's own hand, dated 3 weeks ago. It declares you mentally unfit and names him Supreme Alpha by emergency council vote. It bypasses every legitimate succession law. It grants him absolute power. I threw the document onto the council table. The nearest beta picked it up, his hands shaking as he read. His face went white. "This seal. This is authentic. This is the Chancellor's private seal." Drusus laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "You truly believe this theater will save you? You think a discredited Omega's word means anything? The Marin line is cursed. Everyone knows it. Her parents tried to overthrow the rightful order. They spread sedition and lies. She follows in their footsteps, inventing conspiracies to—" "I was there," another voice interrupted. An elderly beta stepped forward from the council. 20 years ago, when her parents were executed. I was junior counsel then. I witnessed the trial." His voice cracked. "There was no trial. Just an order from you, Chancellor. Just accusations of treason that were never proven. You wanted their territory, their resources, their alliance networks. So you manufactured evidence and convinced Marcus's father to sign the execution order." "Lies," Drusus hissed, but his composure was crumbling. "You senile fool. The Marin line wasn't cursed," the beta continued. "They were inconvenient. They controlled the eastern trade routes. They had loyalty from 3 major houses. They asked too many questions about missing funds and suspicious council decisions. So you destroyed them. Just like you're destroying Marcus now." The chamber erupted again. Council members shouted. Guards looked uncertain. The carefully constructed power structure Drusus had built began to crack. Marcus stood, and despite his weakness, the alpha command in his voice silenced everyone instantly. "Chancellor Drusus Castor Ven. You stand accused of high treason, attempted murder of the Supreme Alpha, conspiracy to usurp the throne, and historical crimes against the Marin House. How do you answer?" Drusus's mask shattered completely. The false grief, the calculated concern, the political maneuvering, all of it fell away, revealing the naked ambition beneath. "How do I answer? I answer that I've spent 20 years cleaning up the Corvinus line's weakness. Your father was a sentimental fool who let outdated honor codes interfere with necessary progress. You're no better. Paralyzed by tradition, unable to make hard choices, wasting our strength on obsolete pack laws." He gestured wildly at the council. "Yes, I removed the Marin House. They were obstacles. Yes, I positioned myself for succession. Someone had to ensure stability. Yes, I introduced substances to demonstrate your declining capacity. The pack needs strength, not a Supreme Alpha who hesitates, who questions, who allows forbidden mating bonds with exiled Omegas to cloud his judgment." The chamber froze. Every eye snapped to Marcus, then to me. The secret was out. "You felt it," Drusus said, his voice dripping with contempt. 3 months ago at the Harvest Moon Festival. The mating bond with this cursed Omega. I saw your face. I saw the weakness. So I acted. I saved you from your own base instincts. I removed the temptation and began the process of transition to a leader who wouldn't be compromised by such inappropriate connections." Marcus's hands gripped the throne arms so tightly his knuckles went white. The golden eyes I knew so well blazed with fury and something else, something that made my heart break and soar simultaneously. Pain, longing, regret. You admit to poisoning the Supreme Alpha? One council member asked, horrified. I admit to recognizing reality, Drusus snapped. The old laws are dying. The pure bloodline obsession is dying. We need pragmatic leadership, not romantic idealism. I would have been that leader. I would have transformed these territories into something greater than your precious traditions. By murdering me, Marcus said softly. By destroying an innocent house. By corrupting everything our ancestors built. Your ancestors built a cage, Drusus roared. Pack law is a chain around our throats. The bloodline requirement is arbitrary. The mating bond restrictions are barbaric. I was freeing us from. He never finished. Marcus moved with the speed of a true alpha, crossing the distance between them before anyone could react. His hand closed around Drusus's throat, lifting him off the ground despite his weakened state. You poisoned me, Marcus growled, his voice dropping to the alpha tone that compelled obedience. You murdered Livia's parents. You corrupted my council. You violated every sacred law that holds our civilization together. And you dare speak of freedom. Drusus clawed at Marcus's grip, his face purpling. The bond will destroy you, both. Pack law demands. Then pack law changes, Marcus said. Starting now. He dropped Drusus, who collapsed gasping. Then Marcus turned to the assembled council, to the guards, to every witness in that chamber. I am Marcus Aurelius Corvinus, Supreme Alpha of the Northern Territories. I have been poisoned, undermined, and manipulated by my own chancellor. But I stand before you alive, aware, and ready to reclaim my authority. He gestured to me. Livia Cassia Marin saved my life. She risked exile and death to expose this corruption. She embodies the courage and honor that should define our pack. And yes, she is my mate. The fates chose her, not politics, not bloodlines, not convenient alliances. Her. The chamber erupted in chaos again, but Marcus raised his hand for silence. I know the law. I know the precedent. An alpha of the Corvinus line cannot mate with an omega of fallen houses. The pure bloodline must be maintained. Violators face execution. He paused, his eyes locked on mine. But that law was written by those who valued power over truth, control over destiny, tradition over justice. It's time for new laws. You cannot simply rewrite centuries of tradition, a council member protested. The other territories will never accept. The other territories will accept strength, Marcus interrupted. And nothing demonstrates strength better than an alpha who can admit when he's wrong, expose corruption in his own house, and choose his mate based on merit rather than political convenience. He extended his hand to me. Livia, join me. I should have hesitated. Every instinct screamed caution. This was happening too fast, too publicly, with too many enemies watching. But the mating bond pulled me forward like a tide, and I found myself crossing that chamber, ascending those steps, taking his hand. The moment our skin touched, power erupted through the room. Golden and silver light swirled around us, the visible manifestation of a mating bond acknowledged, accepted, embraced. It was ancient magic, the kind that predated councils and laws and political maneuvering. Pure, undeniable, absolute. Several council members fell to their knees. Others gasped. Even Drusus, still crumpled on the floor, stared in shock. This is the bond you tried to prevent, Marcus said, his voice ringing with authority. This is the power you feared. Not because it weakens me, but because it exposes how hollow your ambitions truly are. He turned to the council. Effective immediately, Chancellor Drusus Castor Ven is stripped of all titles and sentenced to life imprisonment for high treason. His properties are seized. His house is dissolved. His name is stricken from the honorable records. Guards moved forward immediately, dragging Drusus away. He struggled, screaming about injustice and corruption and traditions, but his power was broken. He was nothing now, just a traitor heading for a cell. Marcus swayed slightly, and I steadied him. The poison was still in his system, still weakening him despite the truth being exposed. "You need a healer," I whispered. "I need you," he replied, loud enough for the chamber to hear. "The bond will stabilize me. Your presence will help purge the poison. That's how true mates work. They heal each other." He was right. I could already feel it, the way our energies balanced and complemented each other. The silver in my blood neutralized the poison in his. The strength in his alpha nature bolstered my omega resilience. We were designed for each other, crafted by fate itself. But the council wasn't convinced. A senior beta stood, his expression troubled. "Supreme Alpha, we do not question your authority or your judgment in the Chancellor's guilt. The evidence is overwhelming. However, the matter of the mating bond remains complicated. Pack law. Pack law is under review," Marcus said firmly. "I'm calling a Grand Council in 30 days. Every territory will send representatives. We will discuss modernizing our traditions, including the restrictions on mating bonds between houses. Until then, Livia Kashamaran is under my direct protection as my acknowledged mate. Anyone who challenges this challenges me personally." The threat was clear. No one would dare. But the political calculation was also clear. Marcus had just appended centuries of tradition, and not everyone would accept it quietly. The other territories would react. Rival houses would scheme. We'd won this battle, but the war for our right to exist together was just beginning. Marcus seemed to read my thoughts. He squeezed my hand. 30 days to prepare. 30 days to build our case. 30 days to prove that strength comes from truth, not tradition. And if they reject the changes? I asked quietly. His smile was grim. Then we fight. Together. The council session ended in controlled chaos. Members scattered to their respective houses, carrying news of the day's revelations. Servants spread the story through every corridor and kitchen. By nightfall, all of the capital would know that the Supreme Alpha had exposed a conspiracy, reclaimed his throne, and acknowledged a forbidden mate. The reactions would be explosive. Marcus insisted on walking to his chambers without assistance, though I stayed close in case his strength failed. We moved through corridors I'd once cleaned as a nameless servant, passing nobles who stared openly at us. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed disgust. A few showed calculation, already planning how to exploit this situation. Once inside his private chambers, Marcus finally allowed himself to collapse onto a chair. The facade of strength fell away, revealing how much the confrontation had cost him. He looked even more exhausted than before, his skin gray, his breathing labored. "You should have stayed in bed," I said, moving to examine him. "You could have sent guards to arrest Drusus. You didn't need to." "I needed to face him," Marcus interrupted. "I needed everyone to see that I'm still capable of ruling, despite the poison." He caught my hand again. "And I needed to acknowledge you publicly. If I'd waited, if I'd been cautious, you'd have been arrested or killed before I recovered. Drusus had too many allies, too many contingencies." He was right. The only reason I was still alive was because Marcus had moved decisively, staking his entire authority on my truth. "Tell me about the Shadowlands," he said quietly. "Tell me how you survived." So I did. I told him about the brutal first weeks when rogues tested me constantly, about learning to fight with broken weapons and desperate fury, about finding the underground network of exiles who'd been cast out for various crimes, both real and manufactured. I told him about the rogue healer who'd analyzed the poison, an elderly woman who'd been banished 40 years ago for refusing to abort a child conceived outside approved bonding laws. "She taught me about Pack law's darker history," I said. "How it's been weaponized against anyone who doesn't fit the pure bloodline narrative. How many houses have been destroyed, how many mates separated, how many lives ruined in the name of tradition." Marcus listened with increasing horror. I didn't know. I was raised believing the law protected us, maintained order, preserved our strength. It does protect certain people, I said. The powerful, the connected, the ones who benefit from controlling who can mate, who can hold territory, who can pass on their bloodline. Everyone else just survives or dies. Then we change it, Marcus said firmly. All of it. Starting with your house. He stood with visible effort and moved to his desk, pulling out official papers. I hereby restore the Marin House to full standing. All territories, properties, and rights seized 20 years ago are returned to you. All accusations against your parents are investigated anew with full transparency. And you are recognized as heir to your family's legacy. I stared at the documents he was preparing, my eyes burning with tears I refused to shed. Why? Why risk everything for me? You could have acknowledged the poisoning, punished Drusus, and maintained the status quo. You could have kept your throne secure. Because you're my mate, he said simply. Because the bond chose you. Because you risked your life to save mine when you could have let me die and been free of the line that destroyed your family. Because. He paused, his voice dropping. Because I've loved you since the moment our eyes met at the Harvest Moon Festival, and I've been a coward about it until now. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest. I loved you before that, I admitted. I loved you from the shadows, from my servant's position, from places where love was foolish and impossible. I memorized every detail about you. I learned your habits, your struggles, your moments of kindness that no one else seemed to notice. I loved you hopelessly. Not hopelessly, Marcus said, closing the distance between us. Never hopelessly. The bond was there even then, waiting for the right moment to manifest. We just needed time to find each other. He cupped my face with trembling hands. I'm still poisoned. I'm still weak. I have 30 days to convince an entire nation to change laws that have stood for centuries. I have enemies in every territory who will use this situation to undermine me. And I'm asking you to stand beside me through all of it. I already stood beside you, I said. I came back from exile. I exposed the conspiracy. I invoked ancient law to save your life. What makes you think I'd abandon you now? Because it's going to get worse, he said grimly. Much worse. Drusus wasn't working alone. He couldn't have manipulated the council so effectively without support. There are others involved. Other council members, other houses, maybe even representatives from other territories. When they realize their coup failed, they'll regroup. They'll attack differently. How? Through you, Marcus said. They'll dig into your past, invent new charges, question the legitimacy of the bond. They'll claim you're a manipulator, a witch, an opportunist who saw a weakened alpha and exploited the situation. They'll paint me as compromised, controlled, unfit to rule because I can't resist your influence. I'd expected this. In the Shadowlands, I'd learned that power never surrendered willingly. So we build our defense. We gather allies. We demonstrate that our bond makes you stronger, not weaker. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, I acknowledged. But it's possible. You have loyalists in your guard, in the merchant houses, in the territories. People who value justice over political games. We find them. We organize them. We show that your willingness to challenge corrupt traditions makes you a better leader, not a weaker one. Marcus studied me with something like wonder. You've changed. The servant girl I remember was quiet, careful, always hiding. The Shadowlands burned away the parts of me that were afraid, I said. What remained learned to fight. He smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time since I'd returned. Then we fight together. The next 30 days were a calculated campaign of political warfare and strategic alliance building. Marcus worked from his chambers, gradually regaining strength as the poison left his system. I became his shadow, his advisor, his very public partner. We appeared together at every council session, every public gathering, every ceremony. The message was clear. We were united, unashamed, and unbreakable. The reactions varied wildly. Some houses declared immediate support, seeing an opportunity to ally with a reformed authority. Others withdrew into hostile silence, clearly plotting their opposition. The younger generations largely celebrated the changes, while the older generation clung to traditional values with desperate fervor. 3 houses explicitly challenged our right to mate, demanding Marcus renounce me or face formal contest for the throne. Marcus declined all 3 challenges with a counteroffer. Present evidence of how the traditional laws had strengthened the pack, or withdraw their objections. Not one could provide compelling evidence. Most pack law existed because it had always existed, not because it demonstrably improved anything. But the real danger came from unexpected quarters. A delegation from the Southern Territories arrived 2 weeks before the Grand Council, led by Quintus Tiberius Nero, their supreme alpha. He was older than Marcus, weathered by decades of rule, and deeply traditional. We received him in the formal throne room with full ceremony. Marcus sat in his throne, fully recovered now, radiating the power and authority he'd reclaimed. I stood beside him, not behind, not subservient, but equal. The positioning was deliberate and provocative. Quintus studied us with cold assessment. Marcus Aurelius Corvinus. You've created quite a scandal. I've exposed quite a corruption, Marcus corrected. And modernized outdated laws in the process. Modernized, Quintus repeated, his tone skeptical. An interesting euphemism for destroying centuries of tradition. Tell me, do you truly believe this mating bond is genuine? Or is it possible that a clever Omega from a disgraced house saw an opportunity to manipulate a weakened Alpha? The insult was calculated to provoke a reaction. I remained perfectly still, my expression neutral. Marcus, however, bristled. You question the bond. You question fate itself. I question timing, Quintus said. Your father executed her parents. You signed her banishment. Yet somehow, conveniently, you discover your mates just as your chancellor's conspiracy is exposed. Forgive my skepticism, but it reads like a fairy tale designed to justify radical legal changes. The bond manifested at the Harvest Moon Festival, I interjected calmly. 3 months before the conspiracy was exposed. Marcus banished me specifically because we both felt it and he believed honoring pack law required separation. The timing only seems convenient if you ignore the actual sequence of events. Quintus turned his attention fully to me. You speak boldly for an Omega of a fallen house. I speak truthfully for the mate of the Supreme Alpha, I corrected. My house is restored. My family's honor is being investigated fairly. And I've earned my position by saving Marcus's life, not through manipulation. By presenting evidence against the Chancellor, Quintus said. Evidence you claim to have gathered while exiled. How remarkably fortunate that you had access to his private chambers, his purchase records, his correspondence. Almost as if someone arranged that access for you. The implication was clear. He was suggesting Marcus had staged the entire conspiracy to justify breaking the bonding laws. Chancellor Drusus is imprisoned and has confessed to his crimes, Marcus said coldly. 6 witnesses have testified. The poison has been analyzed by 3 independent healers. The evidence is overwhelming and independently verified. If you're suggesting I poisoned myself to justify mating with Livia, you insult both my intelligence and my honor. I'm suggesting, Quintus said carefully, that appearances matter. That other territories will question these changes. That your authority rests on tradition, and when you undermine that tradition, you undermine yourself. My authority rests on strength, Marcus countered. On justice. On the capacity to recognize when laws harm rather than help. Yes, I'm challenging tradition. I'm also eliminating corruption, exposing conspiracies, and demonstrating that leadership means evolution, not stagnation. Pretty words, Quintus said. But the Grand Council will demand more than rhetoric. They'll want proof that your bond is genuine, not political. They'll want assurance that this isn't the first step toward complete dissolution of the old ways. And they'll want to know what happens to other Omegas in similar situations. Will you grant exceptions to everyone? Will pack law become meaningless? These were the questions we'd been expecting. We'd spent 2 weeks crafting responses, building frameworks, preparing legal arguments. The bond is provable through traditional means, I said. We'll submit to any verification ritual the Council requires. As for broader changes, we're proposing clear standards. Mating bonds recognized by fate take precedence over political considerations. Houses can only be condemned with proper trials and evidence. Omegas have the same legal protections as any pack member. These aren't radical ideas. They're basic justice. Basic justice that upends our entire social structure, Quintus said. Do you understand the chaos you're inviting? Every disgruntled Omega will claim a bond with someone powerful. Every fallen house will demand restoration. Every exile will seek return. You're opening floodgates you cannot close. Then perhaps they should have been opened centuries ago, Marcus said quietly. Perhaps the chaos we fear is less dangerous than the injustice we've normalized. Quintus stared at him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a thin, cold expression. You remind me of your father in his youth. He also wanted to change the world, to make pack law more just. Then he learned that idealism costs lives, that compromise is survival, that tradition exists because without it, we descend into tribal warfare. My father learned to rationalize corruption, Marcus said flatly. He signed execution orders for innocent people because it was politically convenient. I won't make the same mistake. Then you'll make different mistakes, Quintus said. More costly ones. I came here to assess whether you're a reformer or a fool. I remain undecided. He turned to leave, then paused. The Grand Council convenes in 2 weeks. Come prepared to defend not just your mate, but your entire vision for our future. Because if you fail, if you cannot convince the other territories that these changes strengthen rather than weaken us, they will remove you. Alpha challenge. Formal combat. Death or abdication. He left us with that ominous prediction hanging in the air. Marcus waited until the chamber doors closed before speaking. He's right. We need more than good arguments. We need allies willing to speak for us, evidence of successful reforms, something concrete that proves our approach works. Then we have 2 weeks to create it, I said. We spent every waking moment of those 2 weeks building our case. We interviewed dozens of pack members, Omegas who'd been mistreated, Betas who'd witnessed corruption, even some Alphas who privately supported reform but feared speaking publicly. We documented patterns of abuse, cases where pack law had been weaponized, instances where innocent people had suffered for political convenience. We also reached out to younger council members, to merchant houses tired of aristocratic manipulation, to military commanders who valued merit over bloodline. We built a coalition of voices demanding change, not just accepting it. And we prepared for the possibility that words wouldn't be enough. Marcus trained daily, rebuilding strength the poison had stolen. I trained beside him, learning combat techniques I'd only practiced crudely in the Shadowlands. If this came down to formal challenge, we needed to be ready. The night before the Grand Council, Marcus couldn't sleep. We stood on the balcony of his chambers, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Coming back. You could have disappeared into the Shadowlands, built a new life where no one knew your history. I regret nothing, I said honestly. I regret that we lost years to fear and tradition. I regret that people had to die for Drusus's ambition. I regret that we still have to fight for something that should be our simple right. But coming back. Exposing the truth. Standing beside you. Never. He pulled me close. If tomorrow goes badly. It won't. If it does, he persisted. I want you to run. Don't stay to watch me fall. Don't let them use you as leverage. Just survive. Find happiness somewhere beyond these political games. Marcus Aurelius Corvinus, I said firmly. If you fall, I fall with you. That's what mates do. We don't run. We don't surrender. We fight until there's nothing left to fight for. And then we fight anyway because that's what love demands. He kissed me then, fierce and desperate and tender all at once. The bond between us blazed like starfire, visible to anyone who might be watching from the courtyards below. Let them see. Let them understand that what we had was real, powerful, undeniable. Let them try to break it. The Grand Council assembled at dawn in the ancient amphitheater where pack law had been debated for 1,000 years. Representatives from all 12 territories filled the stone seats. Alphas, betas, senior council members, each with voting authority. Hundreds of observers packed the upper galleries, witnesses to whatever would unfold. Marcus and I entered together, walking down the central aisle while everyone watched. Some faces showed support. Others showed contempt. Most showed careful neutrality, waiting to see which way power would flow. Quintus Tiberius Nero stood at the speaker's platform, acting as moderator. We convene this Grand Council to address matters of pack law, territorial authority, and legal reform. Marcus Aurelius Corvinus has proposed sweeping changes to traditional bonding laws, house restoration procedures, and omega rights. These changes have been distributed for review. Today we debate their merit. He gestured to Marcus. Supreme Alpha of the Northern Territories. Present your case. Marcus stepped forward, and I felt every eye in that amphitheater measure him, judge him, calculate whether he was strong enough to enforce these radical ideas. Honored representatives, he began. I stand before you not to destroy tradition, but to fulfill its true purpose. Pack law was designed to protect our people, maintain order, and ensure justice. But somewhere across the centuries, it became a weapon of control rather than protection. It became a tool for the powerful to maintain power, regardless of merit or truth. He gestured to me. This is Livia Cassia Marin, my mate. Our bond is genuine, verified by ancient rituals, witnessed by the entire Northern Court. Yet according to our traditional laws, acknowledging this bond should result in both our deaths. She is Omega of a fallen house. I am Alpha of a pure bloodline. The law demands we be separated or executed. He paused, letting that sink in. I ask you, what purpose does this serve? How does preventing genuine mates from bonding strengthen our pack? How does executing people for the crime of destiny make us better? It maintains bloodline purity, someone called from the Southern delegation. It prevents dilution of alpha strength across generations. Does it? Marcus challenged. Show me evidence that forced separation of mates produces stronger offspring than natural bonds. Show me data proving that arranged political marriages create better leaders than choosing partners based on genuine connection. Show me anything beyond vague tradition that justifies this law. Silence met his challenge. 'Cause there was no evidence. There had never been evidence. Just assumptions passed down so long they'd hardened into unquestioned truth. Furthermore, Marcus continued, consider the corruption this system enables. My former chancellor murdered innocent people to seize their territory and eliminate questions about his embezzlement. He justified it using pack law, claiming the Marin House violated unspecified codes, that their execution was necessary for stability. No trial. No evidence. Just accusations and death. He pulled out documents we'd prepared. These are 23 similar cases across the past 50 years. Houses destroyed, mates separated, people banished or executed. All using pack law as justification, all serving the political interests of those in power. We've created a legal system that rewards corruption and punishes honesty. A beta from the Eastern Territories stood. You speak of corruption as if it's unique to pack law. Every legal system has abuse. That doesn't mean we abandon all structure. I'm not proposing we abandon structure, Marcus said. I'm proposing we reform it. Clear standards for house condemnation. Mandatory trials with evidence. Recognition of fate-chosen bonds regardless of political considerations. Legal protections for Omegas equal to those for any pack member. These changes don't destroy order. They strengthen it by removing tools of abuse. And what of the chaos? Quintus interjected. What of every Omega who claims a convenient bond with someone powerful? What of exiles demanding return based on supposed injustice? We establish verification procedures, I said, stepping forward. Bond verification has existed for centuries. Rituals that cannot be faked, magic that proves genuine connections. We use those. As for exiles, we review cases with proper investigation. Real crimes still warrant punishment. But manufactured charges, political conveniences, corruption-based condemnations, those we overturn. You speak confidently for someone restored only weeks ago, a representative from the Western Territories observed. What makes you qualified to redesign our entire legal framework? I survived it, I said simply. I lived as the daughter of a fallen house. I experienced every injustice you're defending. I watched my parents executed without trial. I was banished without evidence. I fought for survival in the Shadowlands alongside others who'd been cast out for crimes like refusing arranged marriages or questioning authority. I know exactly where your traditional system fails because I lived in those failures. She also saved my life, Marcus added. She exposed a conspiracy that nearly destroyed the Northern Territories. She demonstrated courage, intelligence, and honor while every traditional supporter stood by uselessly or actively participated in the plot. Perhaps the question isn't what makes her qualified, it's what made the rest of you so blind. That struck a nerve. Several representatives bristled. Others looked uncomfortable, aware that Drusus had indeed operated with implicit support from many who'd benefited from his schemes. The debate raged for hours. Representatives argued from every angle: tradition, practicality, theology, politics. Some supported our reforms enthusiastically. Others opposed any change whatsoever. Most occupied the cautious middle, swayed by whichever argument seemed most compelling in the moment. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, a messenger burst into the amphitheater. My lords, news from the Southern Territories. Quintus gestured him forward. Speak. The House of Cassius has been challenged by their Omega daughter, who claims a mate bond with the heir of House Valerius. Both houses have rejected the bond. The Omega has invoked your name, Supreme Alpha Corvinus, claiming your reforms grant her right to choose her mate. The situation is escalating. Perfect timing. Either genuinely coincidental or strategically planned by someone opposed to our reforms. Either way, it provided our critics with exactly the ammunition they needed. You see, a conservative representative proclaimed, already the chaos begins. One announcement of potential reform and traditional order collapses. How many more will follow? How many houses will fragment? How many challenges will we face? Or, Marcus said calmly, we're seeing the first case where someone finally has hope that justice might prevail. Tell me, what are the specifics? Is this a genuine bond or a claimed one? The messenger hesitated. Unverified Supreme Alpha. The Omega insists it's real. The houses claim she's lying to escape an arranged marriage. Then it should be verified, I said. Exactly as we proposed. Bring her to qualified ritual practitioners. If the bond is genuine, honor it. If she's lying, enforce appropriate consequences. This isn't chaos, it's people finally believing they might receive fair treatment. And how many resources will we exhaust verifying every claimed bond? Someone challenged. How much time and energy spent on what might be elaborate deceptions? Less than we currently spend enforcing arranged marriages that make everyone miserable, Marcus countered. Less than we waste on political alliances that serve council interests rather than pack welfare. Less than we lose to corruption enabled by our current system. You're worried about the cost of justice. Calculate the cost of injustice first. The debate swirled into the afternoon. More representatives shared concerns. Others offered support. We answered every question, addressed every fear, provided frameworks for every scenario they raised. But I could feel the momentum. We were winning. Not unanimously, not easily, but we were shifting the balance. The younger representatives especially responded to our arguments, while even some traditional voices acknowledged that certain reforms made sense. Then Quintus called for a vote on the core proposal. Should fate-verified mate bonds be recognized regardless of house standing, with appropriate verification procedures? The counting took agonizing minutes. Representatives conferred with their delegations, calculated political costs, weighed tradition against pragmatism. Finally, Quintus announced the result. 7 territories in favor, 4 opposed, 1 abstention. The proposal passes. Relief crashed through me so powerfully I nearly collapsed. Marcus squeezed my hand. His expression carefully controlled, but I felt his triumph through the bond. We'd won. Not everything we wanted, not complete reform, but the core principle. Mate bonds would be honored. The most fundamental injustice would be corrected. But Quintus wasn't finished. The second proposal, regarding wholesale review of historical house condemnations and exile cases, requires additional consideration. The Council agrees to form an investigation committee with representatives from multiple territories. Cases will be reviewed over the next year, with quarterly reports to the Grand Council. Not immediate vindication for everyone suffering under past injustice, but progress. Movement. The third proposal, equal legal protections for omegas, passed with 8 territories supporting. The Conservatives were losing ground, recognizing that public sentiment had shifted. As the council session concluded, representatives approached us in a steady stream. Some offered genuine congratulations. Others made political calculations, positioning themselves as early supporters of reform. A few delivered veiled threats, making clear their opposition would continue through other channels. Quintus approached last. "You won today," he said quietly. "But understand, this is only the beginning. The traditional powers will not surrender easily. They'll find ways to undermine these reforms, to create problems that make people question the changes. You've planted seeds of transformation, but whether they grow or wither depends on what happens next. Then we'll cultivate them carefully," Marcus said. "With vigilance, with integrity, with absolute commitment to proving these reforms work." Quintus studied us both. "Your father would be proud," he said finally. "And terrified." He knew that changing pack law invites enemies more dangerous than any external threat. Watch your backs, both of you. Trust no one completely. And remember, today's allies may be tomorrow's assassins once they calculate that opposing you serves their interests better than supporting you. With that cheerful warning, he departed. Marcus and I left the amphitheater to crowds that had gathered outside. Word of the vote had spread through the capital. People cheered, some cried, others stood in stunned silence as they processed what had just happened. An elderly Omega woman pushed through the crowd and grasped my hands. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter was separated from her mate 20 years ago. He was from a fallen house. They told her to forget him or be banished. She's never been the same. Maybe now she can find him," I said gently. "Have her petition the investigation committee. If their bond was genuine, we'll help." More people approached with similar stories. Decades of injustice, of forced separations, of lives destroyed by laws that valued politics over love. Each story reinforced why this fight mattered, why we couldn't surrender even when threatened. But as we finally made our way back to the palace, exhaustion setting in, I noticed the darker faces in the crowd too. The ones who glared with barely concealed hostility. The ones who saw our reforms as threats to their power, their privilege, their carefully maintained positions in the hierarchy. Quintus was right. We'd won today's battle, but the war had only just begun. That night, safe in Marcus's chambers with guards posted at every entrance, we finally allowed ourselves to feel the full weight of what we'd accomplished and what still lay ahead. The southern situation with the Cassius House Omega will be our first test, Marcus said, studying reports that had arrived throughout the day. If we handle it well, we demonstrate the reforms work. If we fail, it becomes evidence that we've created chaos. Then we handle it perfectly, I said. We send trusted representatives to verify the bond. We ensure both houses receive fair hearings. We show that justice doesn't mean abandoning all structure, just making that structure actually serve justice. I'm sending you, Marcus said, and blinked. What? You understand the Omega perspective in ways no one else can. You've lived the injustice. You can speak credibly about the verification process because you've been through it. And your presence demonstrates that our reforms aren't abstract political theories. They're real solutions for real people. He was right, but it was also risky. Sending me into a potentially hostile situation could backfire spectacularly if anything went wrong. I'll go, I said. But I need your best guards and a clear mandate. If the houses try to intimidate or threaten, I need authority to push back. You'll have both, Marcus promised. And I'll be monitoring the situation constantly. At the first sign of serious trouble, I'll bring the full weight of the Northern Territories to bear. We spent the rest of the evening planning the mission, identifying potential complications, preparing responses to every scenario we could imagine. By midnight we had a solid strategy. By dawn, I was traveling south with a contingent of guards and an official delegation. The journey took 3 days. During that time, reports filtered back about the situation. The Cassius House Omega, named Livia, the same name as me, which felt eerily prophetic, had barricaded herself in a temple claiming sacred sanctuary. The Valerius heir had declared he would renounce his house before abandoning his mate. Both families had threatened everything from disinheritance to execution. The local councils were paralyzed, unsure whether to enforce old laws or new reforms. When we arrived at the southern territorial capital, the tension was palpable. Crowds gathered around the temple where Livia had taken refuge. The Cassius and Valerius houses faced each other across the temple square like opposing armies. Local guards stood between them, looking increasingly nervous. I approached the temple alone, as protocol demanded. Inside, I found a young woman who looked strikingly like I must have weeks ago. Desperate, defiant, terrified but refusing to surrender. Livia, I said gently. I'm Livia as well. Livia Cassia Marin, mate of Marcus Aurelius Corvinus. She stared at me. You're real. I thought maybe the stories were exaggerated. They said you were banished and came back. They said you exposed a conspiracy and changed pack law. The stories are mostly accurate, I confirmed. And I'm here to help you. But I need truth first. Is your bond with the Valerius heir genuine? Yes, she said with absolute conviction. I felt it the moment we met. Like lightning and starfire and coming home all at once. He felt it too. But our houses. They have an arranged marriage plan for him with the daughter of House Aurelius. Political alliance. Trade agreements. Breaking it would cost both families significantly. The familiar story. Politics over destiny. Convenience over truth. We're going to verify the bond, I said. I've brought ritual practitioners from the Northern Territories. If it's genuine, and I believe you, then pack law now recognizes it regardless of political considerations. Your families will have to adjust their plans. They'll never accept it, she said despairingly. They'll disown us both. We'll have nothing. You'll have each other, I said. And you'll have the backing of the Northern Territories. Marcus has made clear that any house refusing to honor verified bonds will face consequences. You won't be abandoned. Hope and disbelief warred in her expression. Why? Why would the Supreme Alpha of the Northern Territories care about a minor Omega from a minor house in the South? Because every injustice matters, I said simply. Because if we only protect the powerful and well-connected, the reforms mean nothing. And because... I smiled. 'Cause I was exactly where you are. Desperate, alone, convinced the world would crush me for daring to want something beyond what tradition allowed. Someone fought for me. Now I fight for you. The verification ritual took place in the temple at sunset, with representatives from both houses forced to attend by official decree from Quintus, who decided to support our handling of the situation. The Valerius heir, a young man named Marcus, another strange echo, stood beside Livia as the ritual practitioners worked their ancient magic. The bond blazed visible to everyone present. Golden and silver light identical to what Marcus and I had demonstrated, undeniable proof of genuine mate connection. The Cassius Patriarch tried to object anyway. Rituals can be faked. Magic can be manipulated. This proves nothing. It proves everything, Quintus said coldly. He'd attended personally, perhaps to ensure we didn't botch this critical first case. The verification ritual has been used for 1,000 years. No one has successfully deceived it. The bond is genuine. Therefore, under the newly ratified Pact law reforms, it must be honored. This ruins carefully laid plans, the Valerius matriarch protested. Contracts have been signed. Alliances promised. We cannot simply. You can and will, I interrupted. The alternative is facing investigation for attempting to prevent a verified mate bond, which is now officially illegal across all territories. Do you really want to test the Northern Territory's commitment to enforcing these reforms? The threat hung in the air. Both families recognized they'd lost. They could accept it gracefully or fight and face consequences that would damage them far more than adjusting marriage plans. Eventually, grudgingly, both patriarchs agreed to honor the bond. The arranged marriage was dissolved. New alliance terms were negotiated. Livia and Marcus were permitted to mate with their families' formal, if unenthusiastic, blessing. As I prepared to depart, young Livia hugged me fiercely. You changed our lives. You gave us hope. How can we ever thank you? Live well, I said. Love each other. And when you see others facing similar injustice, fight for them the way we fought for you. That's how these reforms survive, when everyone who benefits from them commits to extending that benefit to others. The return journey to the northern capital felt triumphant. We'd handled the first test case perfectly. The reforms worked in practice, not just theory. Other territories would have to acknowledge that recognizing genuine bonds didn't create chaos, it created justice. But as we approached the capital, one of my guards rode up beside me. His expression troubled. My lady, there's been an incident. A delegation from the Western Territories. They're claiming you and the Supreme Alpha fabricated your bond to justify the reforms. They're demanding you both submit to verification ritual in front of the full Grand Council. My blood went cold. This was exactly the attack Quintus had warned about. Undermine us personally, and the entire reform movement collapsed. When? Yes. They've already called for an emergency Grand Council session. 3 days from now. Both you and Supreme Alpha Marcus must attend, or they'll vote to invalidate all reforms passed last session on grounds of fraud. I urged my horse faster. We needed to reach Marcus immediately, needed to plan our response, needed to prepare for what might be the most important verification ritual in Pact history. Because if we failed this test, if there was any question about the genuineness of our bond, everything we'd fought for would be destroyed. And I knew, with cold certainty, that our enemies would do everything possible to ensure we failed. The story continues in ways you can't imagine. But right now I need you to do something. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Because if you've made it this far, you understand what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. We reached the capital as twilight fell, the city lights flickering to life like stars against the darkening sky. Marcus met me at the palace gates, his face tight with controlled fury. They're claiming we staged everything, he said without preamble. The Western delegation has witnesses, who say they saw us meeting in secret before the Harvest Moon Festival. They're suggesting we planned this entire scenario. The bond revelation, my poisoning, Drusus's conspiracy, all of it orchestrated to justify breaking Pact law. That's insane, I said. Drusus confessed. The poison was analyzed. 6 household staff testified. They're saying Drusus was our scapegoat, Marcus said grimly. That we needed someone to blame to make the conspiracy look real. They're even suggesting the poison was administered by us to create symptoms that would justify the dramatic exposure. The audacity of it stole my breath. Who would believe that? Who would think we'd risk your life, destroy a powerful chancellor, upend centuries of law, all as some elaborate performance? People who are terrified of change, Marcus said. People who see their power slipping away. People desperate to discredit us before the reforms take hold. He gripped my shoulders. The Western Alpha, Gaius Claudius Marcellus, is leading the challenge. He's one of the most traditional rulers, and he's built his entire authority on strict adherence to bloodline purity laws. If our reforms succeed, his legitimacy crumbles. So he attacks us personally, I said, understanding the strategy. If he can prove our bond is fake, every reform becomes suspect. Every change we've made gets reversed. Exactly. Marcus's jaw clenched. And he's found support. For territories are backing his challenge. They're demanding a verification ritual, but not a standard one. They want the ancient binding, the most intensive, invasive verification that exists. Doesn't just confirm a bond exists. It exposes every doubt, every hidden reservation, every moment of uncertainty either partner has ever felt. My stomach dropped. The ancient binding was legendary. A ritual so intense that even genuine mates sometimes failed it because the magic exposed thoughts they'd kept private, feelings they'd suppressed, fears they'd never voiced. It was designed to prove absolute certainty, perfect unity, complete transparency. Have you ever doubted? I asked quietly. Even for a moment. Even when you signed my banishment, when you thought following pack law was right. Marcus's silence was answer enough. I doubted too, I admitted. In the Shadowlands, when I was alone and terrified. I wondered if the bond was real or if I'd imagined it because I wanted an escape from my situation. I questioned whether loving you was genuine or just desperation for someone to save me. Those doubts would show in the ancient binding, Marcus said. They'd be visible to everyone watching. Our enemies would interpret them as proof we fabricated everything. Can we refuse? Not without appearing guilty, Marcus said. If we decline the ancient binding, they'll claim we're afraid of exposure. The reforms will be invalidated immediately, and we'll face formal challenges to my authority. Multiple territories are prepared to invoke the right of combat if we don't submit to verification. We stood in the palace courtyard, surrounded by stone and history and the weight of impossible choices. Around us, servants and guards pretended not to listen while hanging on every word. Then we undergo the ritual, I said finally. We face whatever it exposes. Because our bond is genuine, Marcus. Yes, we've had doubts. Yes, we've struggled with fear and uncertainty. That doesn't make the connection any less real. It makes it more real, because real relationships include doubt and fear and the choice to commit anyway. The ancient binding doesn't recognize nuance, Marcus warned. It shows truth in its rawest form. Every negative thought, every moment of hesitation, all of it becomes visible. Even if we pass, even if the bond is verified, we'll be exposed in ways that could damage us politically. Then we accept that risk, I said. Because the alternative is surrendering everything we've fought for. And I refuse to let corrupt traditionalists win by intimidation. Marcus studied my face for a long moment, then pulled me close. You're either the bravest person I've ever known or the most reckless. Both, I said against his chest. Definitely both. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparation and political maneuvering. Marcus's advisors urged caution, suggesting ways to delay or negotiate alternative verification methods. But we held firm. The ancient binding, public and unquestionable. Quintus visited privately the day before the ritual. You understand what you're facing? He asked bluntly. The ancient binding has destroyed mates who genuinely loved each other because it exposed incompatibilities they'd hidden even from themselves. It's not a test of whether the bond exists. It's a test of whether you can survive total transparency. "We'll survive," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Will you?" Quintus challenged. "Marcus, can you face having every doubt about this relationship exposed? Every moment you wished you'd chosen differently? Every time you resented the political cost? Livia, can you survive everyone seeing your deepest fears about whether you're worthy, whether you manipulated this situation, whether you love him or just the power he represents?" "Those aren't my fears," I started to protest. "Aren't they?" Quintus interrupted. "Don't lie to me or yourselves. The ancient binding will reveal everything. Are you truly prepared for that?" The question haunted me through the final preparations. Was I prepared? Could I face having my deepest insecurities, my darkest moments of doubt, my most private thoughts exposed to hostile witnesses determined to interpret everything in the worst possible light? I didn't know. But I was going to find out. The ancient binding took place in the same amphitheater where we'd won our initial reform victory. But this time the atmosphere was hostile. The 4 territories supporting the Western Challenge filled half the seats. Our supporters occupied the other half. The tension between them crackled like lightning. Gaius Claudius Marcellus stood at the speaker's platform, his expression coldly satisfied. He was an older alpha, gray-haired and weathered, who'd ruled the Western territories through strict traditional enforcement. "We gather to verify the bond between Marcus Aurelius Corvinus and Livia Cassia Marin. This verification will use the ancient binding ritual, which cannot be deceived or manipulated. Whatever truth exists between them will be revealed." 4 ritual practitioners entered, ancient omegas who'd dedicated their lives to bond magic. They'd performed the ancient binding perhaps a dozen times in their combined centuries of service. The ritual was rare precisely because it was so brutal. Marcus and I stood in the center of the amphitheater floor. The practitioners formed a circle around us, beginning the ceremonial chants that would open our souls to scrutiny. "The ancient binding requires truth," the eldest practitioner said. "Not just acknowledgement of the bond, but exposure of every thought, every feeling, every doubt that has ever existed between you. If your connection is false, the magic will reveal it. If your commitment wavers, the magic will expose it. If your love is incomplete, the magic will demonstrate it." She fixed us both with a penetrating stare. "Are you prepared to be seen completely? To have nothing hidden, nothing protected, nothing private?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "Yes," I echoed, though my heart hammered. The chanting intensified. The practitioners began weaving intricate magical patterns in the air, golden threads of power that wrapped around us, through us, between us. The bond that normally hummed quietly in my chest suddenly blazed, pulling memories and emotions to the surface with brutal force. And then the visions began. Everyone in the amphitheater could see them, projected by the magic, visible as if on a screen. My memories, Marcus's memories, intertwined and raw. They saw Marcus at the Harvest Moon Festival, the moment our eyes met. They saw his recognition, his desire, and his immediate horror. They heard his thoughts, "No, not her. Anyone but the daughter of the house my father destroyed. This is impossible. This is wrong. This will ruin everything." They saw him signing my banishment papers, his hand trembling. They heard his justification. Pack law must be maintained. Personal feelings cannot override centuries of tradition. This is mercy, exile instead of execution. I'm protecting her by sending her away. They saw my despair in the Shadowlands, my darkest nights when I questioned everything. They heard my thoughts. Maybe I imagined the bond. Maybe I wanted it so desperately that I created it in my mind. Maybe loving him is just trauma making me cling to someone powerful enough to save me. They saw me fighting rogues, covered in blood and filth, wondering if I'd die nameless in the wilderness. They heard my bitterness. He signed the papers. He chose tradition over me. Why am I risking everything to save someone who abandoned me? The memories continued, relentless and exposing. Every doubt, every fear, every moment of weakness laid bare for hostile judgment. I felt Marcus flinch beside me as his most private thoughts became public. I wanted to shield him, to spare him this humiliation, but the magic wouldn't allow it. Then the memories shifted to our reunion. They saw Marcus's face when I emerged from the shadows in the throne room. They heard his thought, she came back. After everything I did to her, she came back to save me. She's braver than I ever was. They saw our conversation after Drusus's arrest, when Marcus admitted he'd loved me from the beginning. They felt his regret, his shame, his desperate hope that somehow we could salvage something real from the wreckage of our circumstances. They saw me training beside him, learning to fight, learning to lead. They heard my realization. He's not perfect. He's made terrible choices. But he's trying to be better. Isn't that what matters? Not where we started, but where we're going. The magic dove deeper, exposing not just memories but the fundamental nature of our connection. It showed how the bond had formed. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually through 1,000 small moments. Marcus pausing at his window each midnight, unconsciously drawn to where I worked in the kitchens below. Me arranging his chambers just slightly differently each day, leaving subtle signs of my presence that he'd notice without understanding why they mattered. The bond had existed long before the Harvest Moon Festival. It had been growing in the shadows, undeniable but unacknowledged, until finally it blazed into consciousness when our eyes met. But the ancient binding also showed our fears. Marcus's terror that he'd become like his father, choosing political convenience over justice, rationalizing corruption as necessity. My fear that I wasn't enough, that I'd always be defined by my fallen house, that everyone would see me as a manipulator who'd seduced her way to power. Gaius seized on those exposed doubts immediately. You see, he doubts his own judgment. She doubts her worth. These are not the thoughts of certain mates. These are the thoughts of people manipulating a situation to serve their interests. These are the thoughts of real people, Quintus countered from his seat, surprising me by coming to our defense. The ancient binding shows truth, including the truth that no relationship is perfect, that all bonds include doubt and fear. What matters is not the presence of those feelings, but what they choose to do despite them. The magic intensified again, showing our choice at the council session when Marcus publicly acknowledged me. It revealed his calculation, the political risk, the personal cost, the knowledge that this decision might destroy everything he'd built. And it showed his conclusion: she's worth it. Truth is worth it. Justice is worth it. Even if this costs me the throne, I choose her. It showed my thoughts in the Shadowlands when I decided to return. He might reject me again. This might be suicide. But I can't let corruption win. I can't let him die because I was too afraid to act. Whatever happens to me, I save him first. The pattern became clear. Yes, we'd doubted. Yes, we'd struggled. But every time we faced a choice, we chose each other. Every time we could have walked away, we stayed. Every time we could have prioritized self-interest, we prioritized truth. The ancient binding showed all of it. The ugly, the beautiful, the complicated reality of two people navigating impossible circumstances while building something genuine despite everything working against them. The final revelation came as the magic reached its peak. It showed the core of our bond. Not the pretty surface, but the fundamental truth beneath all the doubt and fear and struggle. We fit. Not perfectly, not easily, but completely. Where Marcus struggled with confidence, I provided certainty. Where I battled insecurity, he offered unwavering belief. His strategic thinking balanced my impulsiveness. My compassion tempered his occasionally ruthless pragmatism. We made each other better, stronger, more complete. The bond wasn't magical perfection. It was messy, complicated, difficult, and absolutely real. The magic finally released us, and we collapsed together on the amphitheater floor, exhausted by the exposure. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Then the eldest practitioner spoke. The bond is genuine. Complicated, imperfect, but genuine. These two are mates by fate's design, regardless of politics or tradition or personal preference. The ancient binding confirms it. Gaius looked murderous. They doubted each other. You all saw it. They questioned the bond themselves. That proves they're honest, another practitioner interrupted. The ancient binding fails couples who lie to themselves, who pretend perfect certainty while hiding doubts. These two acknowledged their fears and chose commitment anyway. That's not fraud. That's courage. The verification is complete, Quintus declared, standing. The bond is confirmed as genuine. All challenges are dismissed. The reforms stand. But Gaius wasn't finished. The ritual shows weakness. An alpha consumed by guilt, an omega paralyzed by insecurity. These are not the characteristics of strong leadership. I invoke the right of combat, trial by battle to determine whether Marcus Aurelius Corvinus remains fit to rule the northern territories. The amphitheater exploded in chaos. The right of combat was ancient, absolute, and binding. Any alpha could challenge another through formal battle, with the winner claiming authority and the loser facing death or exile. Marcus pushed himself to his feet, still drained from the ritual but radiating fury. You want combat? Fine. Name your champion or face me yourself. I'll face you myself, Gaius said. Tomorrow at dawn. Traditional rules. No weapons, no armor, fight to submission or death. The winner rules the north. Accepted, Marcus said without hesitation. As the crowd dispersed, I gripped Marcus's arm. You just survived the ancient binding. You're exhausted. How can you possibly fight an alpha who's fresh and prepared? Because refusing would be worse, Marcus said quietly. And because I'm done letting fear dictate my choices. Gaius wants to prove our reforms make leaders weak. I'll demonstrate exactly how strong choosing truth over tradition has made me. That night we didn't sleep. We held each other in the darkness, feeling the bond pulse between us. Stronger now, somehow, after being exposed and examined and validated despite everything. Whatever happens tomorrow, I whispered. Thank you. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for fighting for truth. Thank you for being brave enough to admit your doubts instead of pretending perfect certainty. If I fall tomorrow, Marcus said, promise me you'll keep fighting. The reforms need a champion. These people need someone who understands their struggles. You're that person, Livia. With or without me. Don't talk like that, I said fiercely. You're not falling. We're winning. Together. Dawn came too quickly. The combat took place in the same amphitheater, now configured as a fighting ring. Thousands gathered to watch. This was history, regardless of outcome. Marcus and Gaius faced each other across the sand, two alphas representing fundamentally different visions of what pack law should be. Last chance to surrender, Gaius offered. Renounce your omega mate. Admit the reforms were mistakes, restore traditional law. I'll let you live. Never, Marcus said. They fought. It was brutal, skilled, desperate. Gaius had experience and traditional training. Marcus had fury and something to prove. They circled, struck, grappled, separated. Blood stained the sand within minutes. I watched from the front row, my nails cutting into my palms, the bond screaming as Marcus took hits that should have ended the fight. But he kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to surrender. Your weakness shows. Gaius roared, landing a brutal strike. This is what comes from abandoning tradition. Soft leadership. Compromised judgment. Marcus wiped blood from his mouth and smiled grimly. This is what comes from having something worth fighting for. You fight for power. Fight for love. Guess which one makes you stronger? He moved then with devastating precision. Not fancy, not showy, just effective. A series of strikes that exploited Gaius's overconfidence, followed by a takedown that left the Western Alpha pinned and helpless. Yield, Marcus commanded. His alpha voice absolute. Gaius struggled, pride warring with survival instinct. Never. Kill me or let me up. I'm not killing you, Marcus said. Because unlike the traditions you worship, I believe in mercy. I believe in second chances. I believe that even my enemies deserve justice, not just revenge. He released Gaius and stepped back. You're defeated. Accept it with dignity. Gaius climbed to his feet, humiliated but alive. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The combat is complete, Quintus declared. Marcus Aurelius Corvinus prevails. His authority is confirmed. The reforms stand. All challenges are dismissed. This time no one objected. As Marcus and I left the amphitheater together, bloodied but victorious, the crowd's reaction shifted from shock to something else. Respect. Understanding. Recognition that maybe, just maybe, we'd demonstrated something important. That strength wasn't about maintaining traditions for their own sake. That leadership wasn't about rigid adherence to outdated rules. That love and justice and mercy could coexist with authority and power and decisive action. We'd won. Not just the fight, not just the political battle, but something deeper. We'd won the right to define what strength meant in a changing world. The story would continue. New challenges, new enemies, new struggles. But standing there with Marcus, feeling the bond between us blazing like starfire, I knew we'd face it together. And that made all the difference. We fought for truth. We survived exposure. We proved that love, complicated, imperfect, real love, is the strongest foundation for any rule. If that resonates with you, if you felt this journey in your bones, tell me the city you're watching from. Because you're part of this story now too. Part of the movement toward justice, toward truth, toward love that refuses to be convenient or easy but insists on being real.